Okay, our next presentation in the theme of emergencies and dealing with plans, etc. I'd love to introduce you to a friend of mine, Konrad Seidl, who's the Manager of Health and Ranger Services at the City of Greater Geraldton in Western Australia. In his position, he manages the council functions for environmental health, bushfire control, emergency management, crime prevention, parking control, animal control, local laws, and everything else that gets shoved in his general direction. Konrad has over 15 years' experience in government, with his local government experience being supported by his background as a police officer and later as a state project coordinator at the former Office of Crime Prevention. Konrad has completed a Master of Public Administration, Master of Arts in Public Sector Leadership, Graduate Diploma in Criminal Justice and a Diploma of Public Safety. He's also the chair of the Midwest Gascoyne Local Government Emergency Committee, and yesterday received a special commendation for, you have to remind me what it was. Based on your Operation Barney Murray, which you're going to get to see very soon. Konrad has written several emergency management plans, and he has a great skill and is well practiced at taking the next step, actually testing out the plans. So Konrad's here to share his experience and skills in that forum with us. So welcome, Konrad. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. Look, thank you very much to AIAM for inviting me to come along and present today. I think these sorts of conferences are a great opportunity to learn from each other, to share some information with people from across the country and across the ditch, and also. From what we learn and share is to adapt things to suit our own needs. So I'd like to also start today just with acknowledging the traditional owners, both past and present, of the land in which we meet today. And I'd also like to commend you all for what you do and what you contribute to our communities across the country and in New Zealand. And look, we've won a few awards for these sorts of exercises that we've done with emergency management, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we know it all. I don't profess to know it all, and today I'm merely sharing with you how we go about things and how that may help you in your areas. And so listen, take in what we've got to offer, but I encourage you to go back home, adapt it, and then make it relative to your own context. So, we can hit this, something.
Our disaster recovery plan goes something like this.
So some people might think of emergency management, and they might think of when it hits the fan, that's what's going to happen. People are going to panic, they're going to run around, and they're going to scream. And in some cases, it feels like that, even if you've got a plan. And then you get to this impact of this incident, and it might even be just in your own workplace. You might be dealing with animals and those sorts of things, but then everything's running smooth. It's been running smooth for months, and then something big happens. Someone breaks into your pound, steals a few dogs, and then all of a sudden you're at work and you're trying to deal with that situation. So an emergency is much similar to that, and these things that come out of nowhere and we're not expecting it. So the City of Greater Geraldton, we've now done 4 emergency exercises whereby we've captured the process on video. And so we'll go through now, and we'll play the first video.
On Saturday, the 9th of June 2012, the City of Greater Geraldton and the Geraldton Regional Airport conducted its third field emergency exercise, Operation Runway. The purpose of the field exercise is to ensure that all agencies are familiar with the geography of the local area, surrounds, facilities and procedures during an emergency response situation. A field exercise also allows response teams the chance to experience real conditions where participants can put their training to the test. Under the Western Australian Emergency Management Act 2005, a function of a local emergency management committee is to review and test local emergency management arrangements. In the case of an exercise at an airport, the testing of local arrangements is possible, as well as airport response plans as prescribed by CASA regulations. The DVD will cover the preparation behind Operation Runway, the theory and the exercise. Extensive preparation and good cooperation from all the different agencies is important when planning a field exercise.
The main exercise is every 2 years, so pretty much once the first exercise is finished, we start planning for the next. 120 odd people are involved with the exercise. They all need to know what's happening, and to the extent that we can tell them, because it is a bit of a surprise for some. But the teams need to know what's going on. We also have to work in with CASA and the Air Transport Safety Bureau.
The exercise planning group, which comprises of various agencies such as the Airport Authority, Police, Fire Service, Ambulance, City Council, volunteers and other planners, meet regularly prior to the exercise to plan and develop the scenario for the incident.
Exercises allow agencies to practice their own response, but in addition, we see a benefit of agencies and individuals working together.
Depending on the scenario, field exercises can last from 4 to 8 hours.
The key to a good exercise is planning and surprise, I believe. It's good to throw the agencies and the police and everybody involved in there into a situation which they don't know what's really happening, and making them think on your feet, because that's what happens in real life.
Prior to the start of the exercise, all agencies, staff, volunteers are briefed about the scenario, and outside agencies are notified that the field exercise is only a simulation and not an actual incident. Volunteers are an integral part, as they are required to play the victims. All people participating in the exercise are instructed that if an authentic incident occurs during the incident, they are to use the term "no duff." This ensures that the incident is treated as a real-life situation.
It's difficult to quantify the exact amount of time, but it's many, many hours. The main role for the hospital and myself is to ensure that there are volunteers available as role players for the day, also organise the hospital participants. The bulk of my hours are spent organising the medical scenarios for those role players. They need to be fairly detailed to give a good guide to the staff on the day. It's also important that those role players are well briefed, and that's part of my role. For the last 2 years we've had genuine incidents where people have become unwell, and they need to know to use the term "no duff" so that they're treated appropriately.
The advantages of a field exercise such as Operation Runway are: it allows people in various agencies to build up knowledge under real-life conditions. Participants have an opportunity to put their own knowledge and skills to the test. It helps to iron out problems or areas that need improvement within the agencies or teams. It helps to build communication with different agencies, encourages people to manage problems and find solutions in a timely manner and in a pressure environment like a real-life incident. And it allows management teams to assess their operational staff from a distance.
Exercises are a requirement under the Emergency Management Act of WA. However, it's very handy to do exercises because it tests your arrangements and plans and any other structures that you have in place. And that gets rid of the little glitches that you don't want to happen in actual life.
We learnt a lot from that exercise, and we had a debrief the following day, just to look at what worked well, what didn't work so well, what perhaps we could do differently in the future.
Preparation for Operation Runway commenced a week prior to the 6th of June, with the positioning of an old bus to be used as the aircraft plane. and sufficient raw material was placed around the surrounding area to use as fuel to burn during the exercise. Operation Runway commenced early at the Geraldton airport, with many of the volunteers being briefed on their roles in the scenario, as well as makeup and prosthetics applied for realistic effect. Volunteers were then placed in situ, ready for the commencement of the exercise. An unused terminal building was used as the base of the exercise, and due to bad weather, the building was later converted to the makeshift triage area. Throughout Operation Runway, observers and referees were there to oversee the different agencies and assess the way they work throughout the simulation. Once participants had arrived, a large briefing was held to ensure that everyone was aware of the safety procedures and the commencement of the exercise.
Fire and rescue understood. We have hoses laid out and ready to apply water and foam.
Ambulance commander to casualty clearing and receiving team.
Hot debrief occurs directly after the exercise, where different agency groups discuss and voice their opinions on how the exercise progressed.
Given the fire situation, it's going to take a while for us to put out that vessel, and today was a good example for that. So whilst the lead combat agency ourselves and with help from the BFS are putting out the fire, it gives the other agencies a chance to set themselves up.
This meeting can stir up emotions, and there it is important that it is facilitated so that positive and negative comments can be voiced constructively.
All of the agencies work very well together. We were using the AIAM structure. For the most part, we definitely did adhere to that. We went astray in a couple of ways, but we definitely came back quite strongly from that, and all the outcomes were met, definitely.
Well, as far as fire and rescue is concerned, today was pretty realistic because a plane's not likely to crash on the runway. So today we simulated it crashing into the field, away from the runway, away from water, and so we had to adjust our procedures accordingly, which worked well, but this is the most realistic scenario we're likely to encounter, so that part was good.
I think they worked very well together. The fact that we had the police coordination centre down, they had the availability of their truck out here today, that helped a great deal. There was a few curly issues that we put in to test the organisations, and they went really well.
We did have a number of fire and rescue people came in and helped us lifting victims and what have you. We had community services were helping with the walking wounded. and it worked extremely well. Yeah, it all worked out really well.
My role was like a ghost where no one could see me, but really they could. I had a bright red shirt on, which means I could go anywhere and not get tagged to do a job. But my role was simply to walk around and be outside the exercise, but to be able to observe and give feedback to our team afterwards.
It was an eye-opener, what was involved. I had a little bit of experience through the range of services and on committees, but I actually haven't done the AIAMS training. So I was lucky that there was a lot of people there with a lot of experience, and I sought their advice for what to do and what to go about, and just tried to use my initiative to get through it.
Well, given the inclement weather that was approaching Geraldton and surrounding districts on this weekend, that limited us with the available resources and manning to combat the exercise, but I think there was an excellent turnout of staff from various agencies, and I think they did a fantastic job.
My role was to play the part of the media and to find out what had happened, to find out if there'd been fatalities. I needed to report back to my newspaper, and I had to get in amongst it as much as I could.
The importance of running a field exercise cannot be overstated, as it is an invaluable tool to ensure that all agencies are prepared if an emergency response is required. These exercises help staff to strengthen their knowledge about their understanding of the emergency response plan, and it can help identify any weaknesses and problems that need to be refined or corrected for any future event. Exercises help train all agencies to ensure that if an emergency response occurs, staff will be able to respond quickly and diligently. Operation Runway was a successful exercise in bringing together local agencies and testing local capabilities to respond. Operation Runway was also an opportunity to showcase the skills and capacity of emergency agencies in Greater Geraldton.
I would like to express my thanks to the local emergency management committee in particular for the input and the great work they do to contributing to Geraldton being a safer place.
Right, so that was Operation Runway, and yeah, we did that one in 2012, and since then, you know, we've gone on to some other things, and in particular, I came to this conference in Alice Springs a couple of years ago, and yeah, basically at that conference, Jeff Irwin, I think he's here somewhere. He did a presentation on the Gold Coast animal management plan in disasters, and yeah, sure. So I took some of that knowledge away, and we adapted it to suit our own context in Geraldton. So why do we plan? It's a good sort of question, and we'll just quickly throw to the floor. Just put up your hand and say, like, why do we plan for emergencies or that sort of thing? Anyone? Identifying resources. Yep, that's good. Understanding threats. Safety. At the back. Yep, I think you missed one P there. Yeah, so yeah, all those sorts of things, and you know, when I was I did some sport coaching in 2007, some surf, 2005 to 2007 of surf lifesaving, some young surf lifesavers, and we had a simple plan, and it was one that the kids could remember, and it was explode and attack. So explode off the line and attack the whole race until you finish the thing. But it was an effective plan, and it brought them some results. So sometimes you can keep these things simple. So this is obviously President Obama, and in response to the swine flu, he said this, and I think it's really hard hitting, and I've got it up on my wall in my office it just reminds you of things. and give some things some context. He said, "It is my greatest hope and prayer that all of these precautions and preparations prove unnecessary. But because we have it in our power to limit the potential damage of this virus, we have a solemn and urgent responsibility to take the necessary steps. I would sooner take action now than hesitate and face graver consequences later." So in this case, they're planning in the incident, and I'm sure there's been some plans done prior in terms of pandemics, but now they're planning within the incident to try and deal with that situation that they've got. So we'll just continue a little bit on the animal side of things now, and this is an example of why we plan. So Paul Edwards, is there anyone named Paul Edwards here today, by any chance? Anyone with the surname of Edwards? No? And well, do people know someone named Paul Edwards or with the surname of Edwards? Put up your hand if you know someone with a surname of Edwards. It's got to be quite a few of you. So there's a reasonable amount, and it's a fairly common name. But this Paul Edwards is not much different to you and me. Thanks to Channel 7 News, this is a photo of Paul Edwards soon after an incident that nearly cost him his life. On the 15th of April 2015, Paul's house was engulfed by fire. He ran out with his dogs and then he re-entered his property to go get his cat. Before he knew it, he was outside being resuscitated, and he said he owed his life to firefighters. And you might be asking the question, what happened to the cat? Well, the firefighters saved the cat as well. So does anyone have a rough idea of, in terms of percentage, like if we think about a disaster hitting, how many people are less likely to evacuate if they have an animal in their house? If there was a disaster and the authorities are saying evacuate, how many people are less likely to evacuate if they've got an animal in their house? And I'll give you a prize if someone gets it right. 42, 50, 80, no. Yeah, lower. 64, who said that? All right, that's close enough. So this is from some research that was done and reported on ABC that 60% of people are less likely to evacuate their homes if they've got an animal inside their property. So the connection that we have with animals needs to be acknowledged by those in the emergency management sector, and a failure to act on and recognise this connection can prove detrimental to response and recovery efforts in emergencies. In emergency management, much of what we do is shaped by policy, traditions and instructions. And what we do as humans, as a funny bunch, we conduct ourselves in ways that are shaped by our coaching and history. So in emergency management, we often work off policy. Those policies are shaped by tradition, and we who work in the sector can be regimented in our approach and follow instructions to the rule. And it's the same is the case with, when I think, when you work in sort of a law enforcement type role or a regulatory service type role with councils, you basically, you follow your procedures and that sort of thing to the rule. So another prize question. Does anyone know what this picture is of? No, it's not a cyclone. Katrina? Yeah. So I don't know which one it was that said that. Okay. So yeah, there's another prize there. So it's Hurricane Katrina in the New Orleans. And I'll just reflect on a quick story about this disaster, which sort of explains a little bit more about planning for animals in disaster. So, Dr. Stanley Cohen is a professor of psychology at the University of British Columbia. He wrote an article titled "The Dogs of Hurricane Katrina," and a story he found from the disaster goes something like this. So, there's a helicopter with military personnel, and they're evacuating people from the disaster, the impact of Hurricane Katrina. An old lady presents at the chopper door and clutching her small dog, And the soldier looks at her and states, "Sorry, ma'am, but the orders are no animals." The woman is clearly upset. She says, "I've got nothing and I've got no one and he's all I've got left." And the soldier says, "Orders are no animals." It's not a very good American accent, but it'll do. So then another officer comes along, and this time it's a captain from the medical section. And he states, "That's not a dog, that is medicine." And medicine? The puzzled soldier sort of looks at him and he says, "Medicine for the mind." And then Captain Anderson hands the dog back to the old lady and helps her through the door. But what happened here, there were some rules and there was some policy shaped by tradition, and then the officer in both cases, the officer at the door and the captain, were both following instructions. The only difference was that one of them bent the rules to suit what he does. So now let's work a little bit on testing some plans, on some workshop together. So basically, when you think about a disaster, it's much like a race, a horse race, because the reality is the impact of a disaster can play out in many ways, and that's very hard to predict. Much like which horse is going to win the race. A cyclone could be tracking one way and then go another. The result of a severe storm could bring unexpected floodings to areas not thought of before. At the time of the impact, there could be a large event on with lots of people there, and perhaps, different people that you didn't expect, maybe culturally and linguistically diverse. So when you test a plan, you have to think not just of the obvious, but you've also got to think of the possible. So we've got an issue. We can plan. We can test, and to deal with that issue, we might have a plan, and sometimes we'll test the plan like we should. In Greater Geraldton, we test our plans, but the key is to amend the plan following the test. So we have an issue, we use the plan, we can identify an issue, we can get our plan that relates to that issue, we can test the plan on an exercise, but then after that we come back and then we amend the plan from what we learnt from the exercise. So we do these sorts of things, and then over time, as people and legislation and equipment changes, we test and amend again and again and again, because obviously our staff are changing, our equipment's changing, and legislation and all those sorts of things, and our partnering agencies, everything's changing all the time. So every couple of years, we'll be testing our animal management plan, or our emergency animal management plan. So the other thing is, we need to have a focus on something that is operational and effective. It has to work for you, and while you can go to a neighbouring council and say, "Can I borrow your plan and copy it and change some words to suit our context?" You have to make sure that they suit your context, and you have to add some flavour to it, and it's not until you test that plan in your area, if you know it works for your area and for your stakeholders and for your people. So there's a lot of elements to an exercise, and this is the paperwork that sort of contains all of these sorts of sections to it. What the plan's about, the authority preparing, and so on, and all these other things. And if you want to get some tips on writing some exercises, you can get this online. This is the Australian Emergency Management Handbook about managing exercises. So that can give you some guidance there, but I'm happy to share what we did with you all as well. But the key components of an exercise is really, what is your objective? What do you want to test? How are you going to test it? And how will you know if the test was effective? or each test. So now let's get into some exercises. So what I'd like to do is on each table there's the Townsville Animal Management Subplan for their emergency arrangements. If we can please, if you can, try and mix up your tables, try and sit with people you haven't before. Probably a good opportunity for those people at Townsville to jump on a table with some people that they haven't worked with or spoken to yet. But I want you to look at that plan there, and have a think about, if that was your plan, what would you want to achieve if you were testing it? What would be your main objective? Also, what within that plan, what sort of things would you want to test? And also decide on some sort of an incident or disaster where this plan could be activated. So then that gives you some context on what sort of things that you're going to be testing and how, and we'll get to that shortly. And also have a think about who are the key partners involved. So each table, have a quick look at that plan. You've got around 10 minutes to get through that stuff. There's some butcher's paper on each table. There's some pens, I think, as well, some texters. And yeah, so what do you want to achieve if you tested them in broad terms? What specifically about the plan do you want to test? Come up with a reason, a disaster or an event on how the plan would be activated, and write up a quick list of who would be involved. So we'll come and hear from you guys in about 10 minutes. Thanks. All right, we've got to keep moving. So it probably doesn't matter too much where we're at with this exercise, but we'll go around the room. We've got our good helper and friend Charlene walking around with the microphone again. So we'll just generate some discussion. So basically we'll go around the tables and just find out how you went with what we had up there, what we were trying to achieve. So we'll start here.
Hi, I'm Tung from Maribyrnong Council down in Melbourne. We've run these things before. They've surprised us with them. They wanted to see how we'd react dealing with children, like dealing with the animals, taking animals off children and putting them somewhere more secure, how we deal with that. They put things in place, like they put a pedophile in there to see if anyone would notice and see what we would do. They had people come in to steal animals because they were, I don't know what was wrong with them, just to see how we would cope and what we would do. And we had the police there, not St. John's, the Salvation Army were there to feed people, to keep them calm, offer them coffee, and just basically it was more about not the emergency, it was about how people were handling it. And what we wanted was to make sure everyone was calm and not panicking and just settled so we could deal with the emergency. And yeah, that's about it.
All right, well, yeah, we'll keep moving because we need to get through quite a few tables, so just let every table have a quick little chat on how they went with these matters here.
Yeah, terrific. Paul Digby from the Sunshine Coast Council. We had a look at what we wanted to achieve, and we wanted to achieve the capacity, or view our capacity to round up and relocate animals, and how we manage those animals in a disaster situation that pose a threat to the general community. The things that we wanted to test: displaced privately and impounded animals, aggressive or evacuated animals, animals causing a risk to traffic and infrastructure, sick or injured animals, and animals trapped in inaccessible locations, displaced or privately impounded, animal cruelty and dead animals. So they were the things that we wanted to test, and that would be in a flood type situation.
Okay, very good.
G'day. What we wanted to achieve, community safety, control, containment and response recovery. Looking at what we want to test, communications, stakeholder relationships, and then media communications, or communications to the public. What resources we have, or what resources we need. And then when we only got as far as number 3, and we picked an earthquake, just because that's what we seem to get a lot of back home, earthquakes and things like that. So that's about as far as we got.
Okay, good stuff. All right, we might miss a couple of tables, Charlene, because we've got so much time, and you guys will get a turn on the next one. Or yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll go there.
Obligated. My name's Melanie and I'm from Rockhampton Regional Council. So we ran a scenario where our animal management facility was actually wiped out by a flood, because mine does go underwater when we flood in Rockhampton. So we were identifying where we could make interim holding facilities. In this case, we actually used the university and the CSIRO, because we do not have an RSPCA shelter in Rockhampton. So we can't use them, unfortunately, and also we partnered with RSPCA to find foster locations for some of the animals as well. So identifying the right contacts, using businesses for temporary fencing measures, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Can we go to the middle, Charlene, over there? Just, yep, that table there.
Yeah, hi. I'm Neil from South Australia. District Council of Mount Barker. We looked at a cyclone event happening in this area, and what we decided we should test were obviously the staff resources, our liaison with other agencies, what service agreements we had in place, tested our communications, occupational health and safety of staff and community. We should test our evacuation ability of the community and animals, how we were going to house the various types of pets and larger animals, with logistics, transport, food, water, vet services, the capability we had to collect stray animals after the event, the disposal of dead stock and the removal of the same, the security of the animals that had been collected, and we wanted to find out what key responsibilities each group had, to recognise the weaknesses of the exercise and discover what resources the state had to help us.
And I'm glad to hear you mention communications, because if anyone was here, we had a conference a couple of years back. We had one of the key agency people from Katrina, and they said the first thing to go down during and after the event was the communications. And then everybody was running around. Nobody knew who was doing who in the zoo, and there was big problems with agencies having their own agendas and not working together. So that's something that really needs to be looked at as well.
And thanks to that table, you know, there was a lot of information you said there, and all these things you can test, and there is so much you can test. So that was a classic example of it. So yeah, we'll do a couple more tables and then we'll keep on moving. So how did you guys go?
Yeah, good, thanks. So yeah, David again from City of Palmerston. I guess one of the main challenges in the Northern Territory that we have is obviously on the 1st of July every year to celebrate self-government is that we have our annual cracker night, and we still like to blow things up in the Northern Territory. Yeah, that's right, because we can. And I guess our main challenge is obviously the safe return of all dogs to their owners. Some of the the risks, obviously, as well as animals, is obviously fire and traffic management. So if you've got dogs out that are running around because of cracker night, potential to cause car accidents, high noise levels. As everyone knows, dogs are very, very sensitive to those sort of. They obviously think it's World War III with all the noise. Dogs at large, dog attacks and dog menaces. procedures with that is a lot of media releases before cracker night, and I know that one of the we like to get the message out there that if any dogs are picked up on cracker night, whether they're registered with council or not, is we return all dogs to their owners free of charge. So that obviously gives people a peace of mind as well. Understanding that there are procedures you can put in place, speaking to your vets, whether your dog needs to be medicated, definitely getting the information out on media, SMS, Facebook, social media and radio. The key partners obviously involved in cracker night are police, fire, SES, ambulance, council, RSPCA and Parks and Wildlife.
That's good. I think we'll keep moving. so we'll get around to some of these other tables that missed out. I'm sure Charlene's got some sort of recognition of who missed out then, and you'll get a crack at it in the next part. So a key when you're running an exercise is to make it real, and you would have seen in that project Runway all of the work that went in just prior in putting the fake blood on people and wounds and all that sort of thing, and this was the exercise we did in 2013 at the airport. Just one of the photos from it, which, you know, if you weren't aware that was an exercise, you'd probably think that was a genuine photo from an emergency. So our next step is we're going to develop some scenarios. So you heard from the council down here that they had some pretty radical scenarios in his emergency exercise about, you know, people trying to steal dogs and all those bizarre things that were going on, and pedophiles and all that sort of thing. I would never have thought of something like that. But when you do these exercises, you try and think of things that, like I said before, don't just think of the obvious, think of the possible. So when you're thinking of the context of all those things that you were just thinking about what you want to test in the plan, how can you test that by, you know, with a scenario? So, you know, there's an example there from Bandimurra where the person's arrived in the car park, and because the incident was a fire, the dog and the person, they're both burnt, and then the staff have to deal with that person that's in pain and anxious about his animal, but also someone's got to deal with that injured dog as well. So again, a quick 10 minutes, if you will, to think about some scenarios. You can think of them outside of the box. If you want to make some of them funny, go for your life. There were some really funny discussions that were held yesterday while people were networking, and you might want to incorporate some of that into the scenarios today. So go for your life, 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll have a quick chat. All right, let's see how we went. Charlene's going to come over to one of the back corner tables and see how you guys went with some scenarios. Just if you've also got the microphone, I would ask if you can please stand up, because if you weren't aware, you're on film.
Right. Rick Smith from Blacktown Council. We've got a scenario following on from our earlier large-scale cyclone that comes into town. The evacuation shelter's starting to fill up very quickly. The cyclone's imminent. We have an elderly resident turns up with his declared dangerous dog. There is no time to send the resident home with the dog to lock it away, and there is no officers actually at the shelter. The shelter manager rings the council seeking advice and some direction on what to do.
Those sorts of things, you know, they're once again, you know, they're not necessarily obvious, but they're possible, and then the staff dealing with the situation at that time have to cope with it. So we're going over to the opposite corner now.
Yes. Hi, Steve Alexander from the City of Yarra. The scenario that we actually came up with would have been in an event where a van of some sort that was carrying restricted or banned or seized reptiles, in particular snakes. A number of them is overturned, and they've all scattered across the let's call it 3-lane highway, or even in a reserve. So the steps that are required from there, the contacts, and how would about in containing that area, and who would be involved with that, given that some are banned within the country, others are restricted, and also the effects of having that those kind of reptiles within the inner city area.
Certainly a challenge. All right, so next, rather than go to a table, I'm sure there's some people here that have come up with some real good ideas that they would like to test. So who's itching to share with everyone their fantastic scenario? I thought there would be at least one. Yeah.
One of the things that we discussed was when we took a whole lot of animals for safekeeping, and that a person had turned up at the shelter or at the pound to claim their animal that we were safekeeping, and the animal wasn't there. So some ladies turned up to collect her dog, and sorry, the dog's not there. And inevitably, we may have given the dog to another person.
Very good. Anyone else? No? All right, let's roll on. So basically, you know, what I'm trying to sort of get through here is that you know, we can think of these issues at the table here, but when you're developing something like this, like how the exercise is going to play out, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to not only just fill in the general stuff about the safety and how the exercise is going to play out, where the site is and all those things. It's also about how what we're going to test, how we're going to test it with the scenarios, and then the final quick one that I want you to have a quick 5-minute thought about is those scenarios that you just sort of worked up, how that scenario will be assessed. So in the exercise, you know, it's always a good idea to have some umpires around the place that are looking over the different operations. You might have different stakeholders involved, but so you would have, in our case, we had an umpire for our animal control team. We had an umpire looking at the Department of Child Protection and Family Support that was looking after welfare. We had one looking at Red Cross and one looking at the veterinary nursing students. So that's the sort of thing that we're looking for. So just a quick 5 minutes in your tables just to think about that scenario and how you would test it. See up there with the man with the burns. So the things that we wanted to look for was that the registration table, the ranger assesses the situation appropriately. The welfare agency was called to assist with the injured person. The dog was taken and attended to by the vet triage. The dog was assessed and treated as per the vet's requirements. The registration form was completed with notes on the injury, and then the dog was transferred through to the rangers and put in the facility. So that's the sort of content that you want to tick off and make sure that it was done right. If you've got it there in writing, like you know what you're looking for, then you can know if it worked. So well and good having a scenario, but you have to know whether when you've tested that scenario it actually worked. So this is appraising the scenario. So just a quick 5 minutes to have a think about that. Thanks. Yeah, we'll go to the back too. Yep. So we'll keep the ball rolling so we get everyone to lunch on time. The main objective of the exercise is just to stimulate some thought. So we'll go back up to that table up there in the corner that told us about their scenario, and we'll see if you can tell us how you were going to test the test.
I think I've been caught out on this one. in some ways, by coming up with a scenario, there are probably a number of steps that we may have already put in place, such as having crates or some type of storage area for people who do turn up with animals, that they're appropriately kept. But some of the situations here are that the staff manager knows who to contact at the council, who the appropriate person is to contact, and can contact them directly. That there is adequate staff available to answer those queries, because they're going to be inundated with a number of queries from a number of areas relating to animals. So the staff are on hand to be able to answer those questions. We didn't get much further than that.
Oh, that's fine. Yep, but that's yeah. It's just we're just stimulating thought and that sort of thing, and it does take a lot of time. We can't just think of these things in 5 minutes and deliver. So Charlene, were you going over to Tim now at the back table there? Oh, he doesn't want to talk.
Look, that's okay. Just my name wasn't Tim, that's all, Steve, but that's all right. We discussed about housing and also the appropriate contact people that would have been experts and so forth in that particular area, and probably also registered local residents that also have handling skills in particular types of animals or reptiles and so forth. So it was more about communication and letting the general public be aware of what's out there and the risks involved. But it was more about getting the right contact people, experts, so to speak.
Yep, very good. And I'll just go to the table just in front of you there. They were doing one on dangerous dog.
We were looking at how you would deal with a regulated dangerous dog when it presented to a storm shelter and there was no time to turn them away or relocate the dog. So we were looking at, what could we retrofit or use to secure the dog rather than having it running around in a natural disaster and attacking people because it's already gone through a disaster and probably terrified. So we looked at things like using utility cupboards, pulling cages out of animal management vehicles, and labelling them correctly, locking them, warning people, and how we'd manage that dog being in that shelter.
Okay, very good. So, so we've gone through sort of three little steps on how we get to an exercise, or what's the general main components of the exercise. It's what do we want to test, how are we going to test it, and then how are we basically going to test the test and and see if it worked. Again, we've thought of things that are not just the obvious, but we've thought about the possible, and that's what you really need to keep on thinking about when you're organising an emergency exercise. Not just what the obvious is, but what the possible is. So, at the City of Greater Geraldton, this was an article out of the State Emergency Management Committee news. So we got the idea of developing the animal management plans from this conference a couple of years ago. We sort of looked around. We looked at some different plans across the country, and then we developed it to suit our context, or what we thought suited our context, and then we ran the exercise and we engaged some of our stakeholders at a local level. So now we played you a video at the start about the Operation Runway, but this one's more related to what you guys do, and in terms of this operation, and we called it Barndi Mara. So hopefully this one will work. This one's available on YouTube, so it should we shouldn't have a problem there.
Bundy Murra means good hands or safe hands, and in regards to animal welfare, they are always in good hands with their pet owners. And in case of an emergency, when you need to leave home, you can take your animals to be in safe hands.
On Saturday the 6th of June 2015, the City of Greater Geraldton conducted an emergency exercise, Operation Bundy Murra. The aim of the exercise was to test the response to the activation of an emergency welfare centre and the City of Greater Geraldton Local Animal Emergency Welfare Guidelines 2015. The purpose of a field exercise is to ensure that all agencies are familiar with the geography of the local area, surrounds, facilities and procedures during an emergency response situation. A field exercise also allows response teams the chance to experience real conditions where participants can put their training to the test. This DVD will cover the preparation behind Operation Bundy Murra, the exercise and the outcomes. The exercise had the following objectives: to appraise the City of Greater Geraldton Emergency Welfare Guidelines and response in line with West Plan Welfare and the City of Greater Geraldton Local Animal Emergency Welfare Guidelines 2015. To evaluate responses from the City of Greater Geraldton staff and support agencies. To examine the activation and management of the incident by the Animal Welfare Coordinator and Animal Welfare Team. To appraise the Department for Child Protection and Family Support's management of the evacuation centre. Assess the suitability of the success of the Red Cross personal support to victims and registration process. Assess the response to the incident in terms of resources, collaboration and capabilities. Enable students from Durack Institute of Technology to integrate their learnings of veterinary nursing with a multiple agency response in an emergency scenario.
The guidelines recognise the connection between people and animals. Without such a plan, emergency response and recovery can be compromised, and furthermore, the safety of people can be at risk. A significant amount of planning went into the exercise. The new guidelines list equipment and logistical needs, hence we needed to ensure we had this ready. We needed a suitable location, stakeholders on board, and staff briefed and across the guidelines. The exercise had to be as real as possible. We needed volunteers, animals and agencies present and ready to act out the special ideas with passion to test agency capabilities. Collectively, we needed to understand where our gaps were in the guidelines, our operations, our people and equipment to ensure this could be adapted to perform better in a real situation. Fortunately, the pre-planning for the exercise paid off.
The exercise commences with a briefing whereby all agencies, staff, volunteers are briefed about safety, the scenario, the parameters and objectives. This exercise had various areas of operation including the animal registration area, the animal triage area, the dog facility, cat facility and livestock area, the welfare centre, which included a registration area, kitchen operations and emergency accommodation. The date is Saturday the 10th of January 2016. And a fire that commenced the previous day in the Shire of Chapman Valley has jumped containment lines and is spreading fast towards the areas of Wagrakine, Moresby and Woori. The incident controller has activated the Department for Child Protection and Family Support to set up welfare centres.
It's been activated by DFIS in regards to a fire that's approaching the outskirts of Geraldton and they're evacuating people.
The affected community is now arriving at the welfare centre.
Maybe I'll just hold on to you, that would be great.
The Department for Child Protection and Family Support is now working with the Red Cross to register people. It is not long before people start turning up to the centre with animals.
I've seen your chappie. What's his name? Unfortunately, we have to keep him isolated. So when did he last vomit? See when that happened? Maybe. Okay. So
Look after me dog. Please. All right.
What's happening, mate?
I'm burnt on the arm and the leg, mate. Go get the dog.
Sit down, mate.
I want my dog.
Sit down.
Where's my dog? Where's my dog? I want my dog back.
Come here.
Where's my dog?
Come on.
Oh,
No,
she's
because
not going to die.
we're going to do our very best.
I'll look after her. Oh, good girl. Good puppy. Yes, she's been a good puppy.
As well as testing out a plan of the local animal emergency welfare guidelines, like in this case a field exercise, such as Operation Bandi Mara can allow people in various agencies to build up a knowledge under real-life conditions.
From a veterinary point of view, it was a great idea to see how we would all work under pressure, but importantly for how much equipment you would need to bring. You don't know what's coming at you. Being prepared for all events would be an important thing that we will take home from this.
Participants have an opportunity to put their own knowledge and skills to the test.
And I think that one of the biggest lessons which I saw helped one of the residents, I said to him, we need to get you well so that you can be there for your dog. As soon as I said that, it kind of kicked in. So that was one thing I take away. I thought, what can I say to this man for the paramedic to attend to his injuries? So that seemed to work.
It helps to iron out problems or areas that need improvement within the agencies or teams.
There's a few things that we could do. One of them is when we impound the dogs in a facility like the one we had today, is to have somebody there constantly monitoring those dogs and making sure no one can get out or anything for the welfare of the dogs. And that also assists with the people that drop them off. They know somebody's there looking after them.
It helps to build communication with different agencies, encourages people to manage problems and find solutions in a timely manner, and in a pressure environment like a real-life incident. And it allows management teams to assess their operational staff from a distance.
There's a lot of learning for us today. We had a couple of unaccompanied minors attend who we had to take under our wings and monitor and keep an eye on. A non-English speaking person attended, so tried to provide information as best we could of what's happening back in their suburbs. So it's just providing welfare support. We don't do that alone, we do it with our partners in Red Cross, CWA. People turned up to provide the catering. That's all part of the local welfare plan for the City of Greater Geraldton.
And I want to congratulate the City of Greater Geraldton for thinking proactively about what to do with animals. People will turn up to evacuation centres with their animals. It adds to the trauma of already a traumatic event if people can't be with their animals or they're thinking constantly about their animals and they put themselves at risk.
A hot debrief occurs directly after the exercise, where agency heads and umpires discuss their observations on how the exercise progressed. The debrief enables a quick snapshot of how the day went and some brief comments on how operations could be improved in a real-life situation.
The key is a plan or guidelines might look good on paper, but you have to test them to know what works or what's missing. Some of the key outcomes of this exercise is that we could say that communication within and across agencies was excellent. We need to alter our guidelines and documentation to suit an operational environment. We need to acknowledge staffing resource needs for people, registration and animal facility management. We need to address resource needs such as appropriateness of temporary facilities. We need to establish stronger partnerships and MOUs with existing partners. The exercise enabled us to get a sense of as close to a real situation as possible. And finally, we confirmed that there was a strong working relationship between agencies.
We found it a very interesting exercise. Our ladies are used to catering. We're used to catering in the bush and used to catering without electricity and limited water and things like that. It was even more important to us regarding the animals for me because I actually saw this in practice in Victoria. My husband and I went some years back to, as part of the bushfire relief in just south of Seidl, and the stories that I heard as a counsellor in regards to the effect of the animals getting hurt and the rescuing. Some of them would put their life down for the animal and would actually stay with the animal and rather than leave them by themselves. Some of them had to get into their cars in a hurry, had to pick up whatever animals they could find and leave their houses, and of course it was a crime scene. They were away for 5 days, so they really didn't know if their animals were alive or dead. So what we've had today that the City of Geraldton has organised has been absolutely fantastic, because the different agencies, whether they're to do with the animals, the vets, the dog rescue, or whether it's to do with the people with the Red Cross and of course the CWA providing the food, I think it's been an excellent day.
Operation Bandimara was a successful exercise. Staff tested their operations, capability and capacity to respond to the activation of a welfare centre with animal welfare requirements. The outcomes of the exercise will work toward improvements to the local animal emergency welfare guidelines and how agencies will respond and work together in a real-life situation.
The City of Greater Geraldton has always liked to be an innovator in relation to everything that it does, and this exercise in relation to animal management is certainly no exception to the rule. The work that our staff have done and the work contributed by the agencies that support local emergency management here at the City has been terrific, and I'd like to thank them sincerely for the work that they've done.
So that was in practice the exercise, and using video to capture the exercise helps with training. It helps with debrief. It also helps when you're trying to you're at stalls or displays, or you're trying to raise the profile of what you and your partners do, and definitely by doing the videos and playing it to them, and it strengthens those relationships that we have. So I'm happy to take any questions now, or I'm happy to take them through lunch or at dinner tonight. And if anyone wants to share or learn from what we've done, by all means, get in contact. I can give you a card. And for those people that won a prize, there's a couple of DVDs here. And if anyone else wants one, I've got a few more. I don't want to take them back with me, so yeah, just come up and grab one, because I think lunch is next anyway. But thanks for that.